Hi everyone, and welcome to the Cat Scrappiness YouTube channel. Today I'm creating a Halloween card, actually two Halloween cards, and I want to apologize because the video is a little long and it's a little just disjointed. I worked on this over several days, and so I had to kind of piece it together. I'm going to tape down some watercolor paper, and I already have circles cut out because they're going to be moons for my cards. I'm going to pull out some squeezed lemonade distress ink and do a night sky or a galaxy background. And this is the way I have found that I get my colors and my pigment to stay so bright. I rub my little mini ink pads directly onto the watercolor paper. That orange is the carved pumpkin. And I'm just putting it on there in random spots. That's the wilted violet. The green is twisted citron. And that is peacock feathers. I've tried this with watercolors and other techniques, and I just didn't get the brightness and pigment that I have found that I get if I rub them directly onto the paper. I haven't had any trouble with these ink pads cross-contaminating either, but I have seen online that if you do get some color change, you could dab it off on another piece of paper. I took my distress ink sprayer and I'm going to spray down a good amount of water to get those colors and pigments to blend together. I sped this up a bit, but I take my heat tool and I kind of direct the color and water kind of where I want it to go. I'm wanting to keep the area around the circles pretty light and bright because, again, I want the moon to look like it's almost glowing. And I'm going to set these colors pretty well. And then I'm going to go in to where I think that it needs some more pigment. Along the edges there's some white spots. And you could probably skip this step of adding more color. I've just found that this is kind of the way that I like to do it, and it's worked for me in the past. So I'm going through with all the colors and I'm just adding bits and pieces here and there. And they're really not bleeding into the underside color because I heat set that. You're going to get a good amount of pigment that's on top. And I really want to get those edges right up next to the tape there, so I have good coverage. Okay, I'm going to take my distress sprayer again. And again, wet those pieces down pretty thoroughly. And you can really tell this time when it gets wet, those colors really start to run and blend. It doesn't turn out really muddy. They kind of stay separated. And again, I'm going to take the heat tool and move them around and set them and to get them blurry and swirly, and I'm drying up some of the puddles around the edges where I didn't want the color to settle or that water to settle. Okay, the next thing I do is take the black soot and at first I use my blending tool and I try to blend on the soot color. And as you can see here, it just gives a really light, shadowy effect. and I didn't like that. I wanted more pigment, so I took the soot directly to the paper, and you can see there it lays so much more pigment into your paper. And again, I'm just doing random areas because I'm going to wet it one more time and let the soot color, the dark color, run all over the paper. And if you've tried these backgrounds in the past, you know that it looks terrible before you get your desired effect. So don't be scared. It kind of does look like a mess right now. I'm going to spray that with the Distress Sprayer again, and you can see how much that soot richens up and starts to spread into the other colors, and it adds that shadowy, dark sky, cloudy effect. And again, because those colors are heat set underneath, they're not going to pick up a lot of that black color, so I can take my paper towel and kind of remove some of the dark where I do not want it, like around that moon area, where I want it to be bright and shiny like a moon. And now to add the stars, I'm going to use some inexpensive white acrylic paint. I'm going to add this to an acrylic block, and you can use all different kinds of white paint for this. I've seen people even use Copic paint. And I'm going to take a couple little squirts of water from my sprayer and mix it together with an inexpensive paintbrush. When I get that kind of watered down and mixed into the consistency that I want, I am going to flick this both off of the acrylic block and just kind of tap my paintbrush with my hand and onto the paper. I've heard of people using old toothbrushes, and there's different ways that, you know, whether you want a fine kind of spray of paint or you want just messy ink splatters. You can add as little or as much as you like during this process. It's all up to you and what you want your design to look like. Now, as you can see there, it's really starting to look like a crazy, colorful night sky with the stars and maybe comets or something in the background. Okay, now I'm going to work on the moon. I colored the moons just like I did the background of the paper. I used that carved pumpkin and the squeezed lemonade, excuse me. I'm going to take those Gonzai Tombi starry color, awesome watercolor paints. And they're in gold, and there's a silver, there's a champagne color. They're gorgeous. But I'm going to take that red gold, and I'm going to get some of that pigment mixed up, and I'm going to add it right onto that little sliver of acetate that I have there. I'm going to take a little bit of water and just make that a little bit runnier. And I'm going to drag that little moon piece directly into that gold watercolor. And this is going to give you not only a shimmer for your moon, but it's also going to give you the awesome look of lumps and bumps, and it really makes the moon look real, especially when you add it onto that background piece. So I'm going to wipe this on and get it just the way I want it. You can see all the shimmer that those paints give you. And then I'm going to clean up my little mess here. As you can see there, I'm using my Lawn Fawn stamp chamois. I use that thing for everything, for paint, watercolors, for my ink when I stamp. And every once in a while, every few days, I just run it through the washing machine and don't dry it. And it washes wonderfully. and I just lay it out and let it dry stiff, and then when I'm ready to use it again, I get it damp in the sink. So I'm going to heat set that watercolor, that gold color that I used, and then you'll see here in just a second how awesome those look on the background piece. Okay, at this point in the project, I was getting really excited. I just love the way that the moon and the background look with those gold watercolor paints. Don't you get so excited when one of your experiments just works out and looks awesome? Okay, this is an SVG cut file that I used with my Cameo. I wanted one of the cards to be kind of a spooky, creepy, more of a Halloween feeling. And then I did kind of a silly, funny, goofy kind of Halloween card. I took the same gold paint and I added little glowing windows to my haunted house, and I added some paint around the edges so when that sits in the moon, it looks like those little edges are glowing behind the house there. This is a die cut tree from the Gina Marie Designs Spooky Tree die set. I'm adding some, it's either black soot or the ground espresso ink, and I'm just using the tips of my finger to add that into places so it's not just a flat brown color. And then I'm going to use a wood grain design of the We Are Memory Keepers embossing folders, and I ran that through and it gives it just a little bit of texture, as you can see there. Okay, I'm going to start building my card. I add that background panel onto some pattern paper by Doodlebug Designs. I'm going to use my ATG gun and then some liquid glue around the thin edges on the top. And using the same technique, I built some ground area that, like some dirt and hills there, using the Lawn Fawn stitched border dies. And that's the first card with all of its pieces. I'm going to add that to a purple card base. And I'm going to add this sentiment later. This is the second card, and I did these the exact same way. One I just made a little creepy, and the second one more funny. I'm going to use some foam tape to pop up the little ground area, the dirt, and the hill. And again, that plaid pattern paper is from the same 6x6 Doodlebug Design paper pad. I'm going to add some foam tape to a black tree this time, cut with that Gina Marie Design Spooky Tree die set. And then the little orange pumpkins there to the side are cut with a die set from Cherry Lynn Designs. It's a pumpkin garland, and it comes with several pumpkins and then the garland part, and I'm just using the pumpkins by themselves to make a little grouping there around my spooky tree. I'm going to add some adhesive on those and just gather those around the tree there. I cut some ghosts out of vellum using another Gina Marie die set, and there's 4 cute little ghosts in that set. I'm going to use some little googly eyes there on the ghost, and not only does it make the ghost cute, but it was also a way for me to hide the adhesive when I glue these onto my background. So I get their little eyes added on, and then I'm going to stick these down with some multi-adhesive in the matte finish. And I'm trying to decide just where I want the ghost to go. I'm going to add that adhesive right behind the eyes to hide it. And I can't decide if I want him behind my tree or down by the pumpkins. And I decide I'm going to stick it down there on the pumpkins. And I'm going to use an acrylic block to hold those down just so that dries really well behind the eyeballs. And that bat comes in the same die set as the tree. So I'm going to add him flying up over the moon. And now I'm going to work on my little sentiment there. I used again some of that plaid paper, and I cut a black little banner there from the Lawn Fawn banners. I'm going to add some anti-static powder with my little EK Success tool, and I'm going to ink up the Boo sentiment. I just had that in my stash with Versamark ink, and I'm going to add white embossing powder and then heat set that. And I need to clean off just a little bit of loose powder, so I just use a dry paintbrush for that. I have to let my heat tool warm up just a little bit, and then you can see how bright and sharp after you heat that embossing powder. How nice it makes that. I'm going to add that little banner onto some plaid paper, and I'm going to cut a little border around the banner. Pop that up with some foam tape. And then I'm going to use some scissors and cut that little fishtail end. And then I'm going to take the whole piece to my paper trimmer so I can get a good straight sides when I trim the rest of it out. So I'm going to add that to the bottom there, and I try to use my liquid glue, and then I think I try to use my ATG gun. I have trouble getting things to stick to Distress ink, so I finally decided to go to my handy dandy score tape because it always seems to work. I don't know why I didn't think of that in the first place. But I got my score tape down and add that just to the front there. And then I'm going to pull that first card that I did back down into my work area, and I'm going to do the sentiment for it also. And this is a stamp from my stash that says Happy Halloween Haunting, but I didn't want the happy, I only wanted the Halloween and the haunting. So I'm going to clip it apart, and I'm going to use the smaller banner from the same die set. I'm going to treat that with the anti-static tool, and I'm going to get those lined up just right, stamp it in Versamark ink, and then add some Princess Gold embossing powder from Ranger. I thought this would look awesome with the gold watercolor that I used on the moon. And I just need to heat set that, and you can watch this embossing powder pop out. It's so pretty. I'm going to use my ATG gun and fold under all those little feathers of adhesive that you get. And then I'm going to pop that right onto the bottom there. And then I'm just going to clip off the right side. And with that, these projects are done for the day. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for such a long video. I would love to see your spooky designs or your galaxy background. I'm going to leave both the Cat Scrappiness and my own Instagram account links in the description box. All the supplies are also linked in the description box. Thank you all so much for joining me today. Again, this is Kelly Cahoot for Cat Scrappiness. Bye bye.